Live from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, the sun and fun capital of the world. This is Dr. John Stamey, and I want to say welcome to another exciting episode of ScaryCast, coming to you live from Myrtle Beach. We got a great show tonight. We've got a wonderful guest. He and I are from the same neck of the woods, and I like that. But first of all, our co-hosts from Ewing, Virginia, the town with one flashing yellow light, kind of like Glen Alpin, North Carolina, the one and only Matt Delph. How are you doing tonight, Matt?
Doing great. Glad to be here.
We're glad you're here too. Oh, I got a funny story I have to tell you after the show about the dungeon in New Orleans. I spoke with
Good.
someone and I heard something about it. You might laugh, but we're probably not going to talk about that on the air. I want to let you know, remind me that. Okay.
Okay.
And from Niagara Falls, Canada, our Canadian connection. The smart guy he is, number one in Canada, Mark Johnston. How are you doing tonight, Mark?
Doing great. Always a pleasure to be on here with you two, my friends, talking about paranormal topics and Bigfoot and aliens. It's the highlight of my week being here with you guys.
Well, that's good. It's our highlight of the week. We're glad to have you here. Now tonight, I met this guy through the Georgia Bigfoot Conference. He has a research group that he hangs out with. They came down. They were absolutely the hit of the Georgia Bigfoot Conference, sitting there basically right next to me on the other side of the door. And George Lunsford got me hooked up with him. He got me hooked up with Tim Dills. And tonight, here's another piece of that wonderful Bigfoot Explorers puzzle. The one and only Rob Effler. Now, and hey, Rob, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing awesome, John. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. And Rob and I had a talk right before the this episode started, and I found out we're from the same county. He
Yes,
was
we
born,
are.
he was born in McDowell County, which is the world birthplace of Marion, North Carolina, and that's where my mama's from. And I tell you what, I love Marion. It's a nice little town. And all I got to say is I walked in there. I walked in there to the liquor store. And all of a sudden, I realized they all started talking like me. And I realized if you're from McDowell County, you have a little bit of a strange Southern accent. It's got a little bit of Scottish in it. It's a pretty accent, but it's definitely one of a kind. So you'll notice that Rob and I talk a lot alike. And I'm proud he's here, and I'm proud he's about probably one of my kinfolk up there in Marion. Because Rob, you do know that everybody in Marion and McDowell County are related, right?
Yeah, I come to find it out the other day that there's several of them that, and that's like that song by Ray Stevens. There's a few of them wound up being their own grandpa.
Okay, well, enough of that. But no, I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad to know that we're probably related. And I know you're a good guy. You and your group were a big hit at the Georgia Bigfoot Conference. So here's what I want to do. I want to start out not the way I normally do. You were telling me the most engaging Bigfoot story in the green room, kind of right before we were talking. And I want to say, Rob's got a ton of great stories. Okay, that's just a fact. But this story I thought was really wonderful. So, Rob, do you mind telling everybody that story? I loved it.
Oh, I don't mind at all. I'm going to give a little bit of a background on it to catch people
Sure.
up to speed. Uh, back in uh, back in January of this year, a member of our team, Harley Owens of North Carolina Investigates, we uh, we were sitting there talking, and he was telling George and I about the evidence that he had found in East Tennessee, and it sparked mine and George Lunsford's interest. We gathered up and went over one Saturday, and it was my wife Michelle, it was Harley, and it was George and myself. The evidence we found in that area it was mind boggling. We found X's, we found arches, we found ambush sites, we found tracks. I mean, we even got growled at a couple of times, and we tried to take some pictures of it, but the way the weather was that particular day, taking pictures was not an option. It was trying to snow one minute, trying to rain the next minute, cloudy, wind kind of blowing just a little bit, but the woods had a strange, midnight graveyard feel to it. It's kind of like, you was by yourself, but you was also being watched and you didn't know what you was being watched by. Well, we tried to take
Yes.
pictures, and there's too much moisture on the ground from the rain and the snow and everything. Everything just did not turn out. It didn't give anything justice. Well, after that one particular day, I mean, we found broke off trees. You name it, we found it. I mean, it was a complete smorgasbord of about anything that you wanted. Well, this past Saturday, we decided we'd go back into the area and see what was going on, see if there's any new evidence, any new footprints or anything. And we got into the area and we was just sort of, dumbfounded a little bit. I look at George and I said, George, are you sure? And he said, something's not right. He said,
All
something
right.
is not right at all.
I've got a quick question for you.
Sure.
You said you saw X's. Did you
Uh huh.
see did you see both types? The ones on the ground and then the ones like supported by two trees. The first time you were there, did you see the both types of X's?
Not so much on the ground, but you could definitely see the ones that were standing up in between two trees. We examined them, and those trees were strategically placed. They were jammed into the ground, and it wasn't. They weren't grew that way. The wind hadn't, or the weather, either one hadn't made them, develop that way, and nature hadn't, because a lot of those trees were dead.
Right. And one thing that I have come to learn is when you have an X on the ground, that it means it's okay to proceed. But if you have an X up between two trees, that's a barrier that's saying don't go.
Yeah,
Is
that's
that is that
after
what
we passed those X's. That's when we got growled at two or three different times, but we weren't for sure if it was Bigfoot growling at us or if it was Dogman.
all right now the ones where they growled at you, were those the ones standing up?
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. That's what. Now, Rick Rellis, who is a friend of our conference, he's a member of BFRO. He's got that in his book. I've got that in my book. So that seems to be a fairly universal thing. And also, if you go, have you ever been to the that wonderful location in Otto, North Carolina? That very spiritual, wooded kind of garden area. Have you ever been there?
No, sir, can't say that I have.
Well, I want you to jot down Otto, North Carolina. Um, oh, what's his name? Squatch Man's son. He came down from Ohio, and we went Bigfoot hunting on in that area. We found tracks. We found X's. We found them, posted between trees. We found them on the ground. We found shelters, Bigfoot shelters. It was amazing what we found there. And the people there, they said, well, it's really known for the little people. And I said to myself, well, there's a lot of Bigfoot activity there. And it was wonderful. So, Otto, North Carolina, and it's not hard to find. So just let me know, and I'll let y'all know where it is, and you ought to go. It's only $5 to get on the grounds, and you'd be amazed what you see. And I'm just telling everybody else, Otto, North Carolina, just inside the North Carolina line from Georgia. It's beautiful too. And go there in the spring. You'll have the best time in the world. So that I'm sorry. I just Rob, I just wanted to tell everybody that, and we had a great time there.
Oh, that's okay. Speaking of little people, that reminds me of a part that I forgot. I'm glad you jogged my memory.
Well, somebody told me to, so must have been them.
Oh yeah. Uh we did find one or two fairy rings back in January.
Now,
And
tell everybody. Not every. We all probably know what a fairy ring is, but please describe that for our listeners that don't know. Okay?
a fairy ring is sometimes they are around a tree, or sometimes they are basically out to the side all by themselves. It's a line of rocks strategically placed. Now, whether I'm not, real educated on, how fairies are, my my most course of study and research is on cryptids and ghosts, but we thought this was odd when we found it, and the way the rocks and everything was turned, it was like somebody had picked them up and turned them just a certain way and set them down. Now, where we is at, we were off the beaten path and way back. I'd say we was probably 200 or 300 yards off the trail, more or less, where all the hikers and everything that normally traverse through the area don't hardly ever go. And we just thought that was amazing when we found it back in January. We wasn't, real sure on what to do with it. We just took a few pictures of it and, went on about our merry business. That wasn't our main focus. We just thought it was pretty cool and pretty neat that we found it. Now, when we went back last weekend, all the evidence on the ambush sites that they had set up, it's kind of like little blinds like deer hunters would make, if you were hunting off of the ground, but you could tell this wasn't man made. And everything we found in January, we got to looking through the woods, was kind of dumbfounded for a little while. George said, something's not making sense. And I said, Harley, are we in the right area? I said, I know we came in on the same trail we did back in January. He said, yeah. He said, something's wrong. So we got doing a little bit further investigation on it. All the sign was gone. I mean, their ambush sites were gone. Everything that they'd set up, even the X's, they were gone. The tops out of the trees that were broke out, that was, 25 inches up to 8 feet. The tops out of the trees, I mean, the stalk of the tree was still there, but the tops of the trees, it was like everything had been removed. The woods had never been touched. It was just, I mean, it was, if you hadn't been there prior to that and you'd have went with us blindly, not knowing what we already knew prior to that, you'd have been looking at me and George and Harley going, "Are you guys need to go to the nut house or something? Are you guys okay?" People would have thought we was crazy, but it just blew our mind that all the evidence were gone. We went even back to where we found the three-toed dogman track, which was real high up on the ridge. We got up there and we found the track, but where the weather had beat it down so bad, even the dogman sign where they had been in there, that sign was also gone. We found scratch marks on the trees. The bark was complete, like it was tore completely off, like what a bear would do. And only thing we could figure out, they've got little ones on the ground, and they don't want nobody being able to accidentally track them back to where they live or anything else for that matter. And they just put the woods back just exactly like it was, like it had never been disturbed. I mean, it was the strangest and oddest and most unusual thing it ever was. And between the Bigfoot sign at the lower end of the ridge and on the upper end where we found the dog man, there was a graveyard. Well, we were standing there taking a break at the graveyard, and I elbowed George, and I said, "What are you whispering about?" He said, "I'm not whispering to Harley about anything." He said, "What's the matter?" I said, "Jerk your audio recorder out right real quick." He said, "What is it?" I said, "Somebody's talking." It was two women and a man carrying on a conversation. It's like, you was in a crowded room, other people were talking. You could distinctly tell that it was two female and a male having a conversation, but you couldn't make out the exact words what they were saying. George hit the audio recorder. We recorded it for, I guess, a minute and a half. And after the voices went away, because we were the only three in the woods,
Okay.
we played it back. We heard it with the naked ear. The audio recorder didn't hear it, and I said, "Well," I said, "guys," I said, "whether you believe in ghosts or whether you don't," I said, "right there's your first case of disembodied voice." And we have no idea what they were talking about. And there's like 55 graves in that graveyard, and it's surrounded by a wove wire fence. And I think the newest grave in the graveyard, if I'm not mistaken, is 1976. I think is the newest grave. Everything else is from 76 back to I think it's 1901. But
Okay.
that was wild. I mean, it was amazing. I mean, it'd make you stand there and scratch your head, and you're just standing there in bewilderment.
Did you have a special recording device to use to record this at all, or was it just a standard?
It was just
Microphone.
a standard audio recorder, like
And
what you would use in a EVP session in a haunted location.
and was there any distinctive words or anything that was detected, or was it just kind of like a muffled conversation?
He was more or less muffled, but I mean, you could tell that it was two females and a male talking, but you couldn't make out what they were saying, and we didn't strike it off as being samurai chatter from Bigfoot or anything. We just, I mean, it was just broad open daylight around about 15 minutes to 11 o'clock that morning, and
Oh my
we were just sitting there dumbfounded.
Ghosts don't punch a clock, do they, Rob?
No, they do not. You never know when you get an EVP, or you might see a full body apparition, or you might see something other that you can interact with. That's what they call an active haunted, or or a residual haunt. You never know.
It's interesting, and I've never told this story, and I'm going to tell it here. Last time I was in England, I love Coventry. That's where
Ooh.
the Godiva walk. And there is a building, it has 1317 on the front of it. It's the King's Tavern. It is that old. And I'll tell you what, you can walk in there and they're all buying breakfast at noon. That's what they eat breakfast for lunch. That's what I like about England because I love breakfast. You get 2 eggs over easy and blood sausage and brown toast with extra butter. And that's just perfect for me. You can't get blood sausage over here, but I tell you what, it's great. And you're sitting there and you're hearing things. And I said to my friend from England, I said, "Are you not hearing voices?" He said, "Oh, yeah, we hear them all the time. We don't pay him any attention." I said, "Okay, that's fine." So I enjoy, with one ear, I enjoyed listening, and the other ear, I enjoyed the conversation. But I'll tell you what, there are places that are haunted. Now I'm going to ask the questions. Matt Delph, have you ever heard ghosts like that?
I have. Are you talking about what he was talking about, the disembodied voices?
Yeah, disembodied voices.
Yeah, everything he's explained is basically just confirmation for what my whole theory behind all this is. Of course, I've been researching since 1996. And these areas, especially along the North Carolina and Tennessee state line, where you got the mountains there, is a high strangeness area. A lot of weird stuff happens there.
Right, and now, am I correct? I'm not going to say where, but if you look halfway up Tennessee and then move up about another quarter of the way, there's an area of high strangeness right there, correct?
Yes. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And I'll say that's not necessarily a place that you want to go. You don't, unless you're equipped with a lot of equipment and a good crew. Matt, is it correct? You don't want to go messing around with one of those areas of high strangeness, or you might not come back.
Yeah, you might not come back for sure. You definitely gotta know what you're getting yourself into. But always have somebody with you. Have a couple of people where you might be on that missing report. But I've noticed, like he was talking about fairy rings, stuff like that. I've seen numbers, lots of fairy rings. I've got pictures, I believe, on my Facebook page somewhere. But mushroom rings, a lot of mushroom rings. We've got video from up there in those mountains of lights before lightning bugs, everything. In the middle of March, these lights up in the that had a intelligence to them. We talked to them. They came around. We got it on video. And then all of a sudden, boom, they were gone. You got in this whole area, like he was talking about, got the voices, you got different things. And to me, going down the rabbit hole, the veil is very thin there, very thin. So you got stuff where I have had, that's where a lot of feral humans, people that have been up and down through the mountains there, I believe you got something crossing over. That's why you're hearing voices from possibly the past into the future. You got everything crisscrossing in these high strange event areas. I've had my phone, as you know, John, physically got sick in these areas. My phone, the date and time changed. All my pictures that I took during that time went back in the past to the,
I won't stop. I have seen those pictures. At one point, the date just changes. And,
yes.
and Matt's just telling you exactly the truth. I'm a witness of that. Right, Matt?
Yeah, yes, you are. And so, I physically got sick and I had to leave the area because I was thrown up, but my date, time changed, everything. So exactly what he's talking about kind of confirmed that whole area. You're going to have Bigfoot activity. You're going to have these dogmen activity. You're going to have, like he was talking about, fairy rings. You've got disembodied voices. You got these areas are just high strange event areas. And now, did you guys ever notice anything on your cell phones, the time change or the date or anything?
No, not necessarily. George got zapped by something Saturday. We were, this was before we got to hearing the voices in the graveyard. We got up through there and George just stopped all of a sudden. He said, "Whoa." I turned around. I thought, poor old boy about fell right here in the open road because, it was gravel. Turned around, looked at him. I said, "You all right?" And he said, "God, no." He said, "My ears are ringing bad." He said, "I'm about to get dizzy." And I said, "Well, get your brains." I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Something's not exactly right." He said, "These woods is not acting right." I said, "Well," if you get to noticing, I said, "we've only heard 3 birds in the past 4 hours." Because we was out there right around by 8 o'clock. And this was, about 15 minutes to 11 o'clock, give or take. And after I'd say about 6 minutes, he sort of got the cobwebs and the bugs out of his head. And he said, "That's the strangest thing," he said, "I've ever encountered." He said, I've never encountered anything like that." And I said, "Well," "my ears are ringing." I said, "But other than that," I said, "I feel fine." But some others out there, I don't know what it was.
Like he was
All right.
directly hit. You felt
Yeah,
some
I
of
mean,
it.
it's like he was singled out.
Yeah.
Now, Matt, I'm gonna halt you there for a minute. I want to say something that I've never talked about, and then Mark, it's your turn to ask a question. So, Mark, please don't let me forget because I just realized that I might have experienced something that is not typical. And this is a question for all of you. Have you ever been dizzy? Matt, have you ever been dizzy? Yes or no?
Oh yeah. Lots of times. Lots of times.
Rob, have you ever been dizzy?
More so on a paranormal investigation than I
Well,
have on
yes.
a
But the answer is yes, right?
yes.
Mark, have you ever been dizzy?
Sure, of course.
Okay, now, how many of you, when you're dizzy, does everything spin around like my fingers going, in a circle like that, or like around your ears? Matt, is that normally the way dizzy is for you?
Uh, I'm not sure really how to explain it. I just feel real lightheaded. Everything's moving around. Uh,
Okay, but
kind of break
okay,
out in
okay,
sweat.
okay, that's
Yeah.
fine. All right, Rob, is dizzy for you circular around around your ears or what?
More or less around my ears, kind of almost a vertigo type feeling.
Okay, a feeling and that Mark, when you've experienced dizziness, is it circular or is it just kind of weird all over?
The one that comes to mind is if you had too many drinks, you get the spins a bit, when you're in bed and it's like everything's
Yeah,
just
right, no,
a
yeah.
carousel. You know what I mean?
We've all been 21 years old. Come on. Okay, you're right. Okay. All right, no, that's great. All right, well, you know what? I had a period of a week that when I would wake up, I would be dizzy. But when I was dizzy, this is the craziest thing. It was going vertically up and down. Now, have you ever, Mark, you ever had up and down have you ever had up and down dizziness?
Just when I'm kind of nodding out, whatever, like I get like a free falling effect, like I'm like, or my orientation seems like I don't know where I'm oriented. So in that case, it would be kind of an up and down effect.
Matt, have you ever had up and down dizziness?
Not that I recall. Not that I
Okay.
recall.
All right. Rob, have you ever had up and down dizziness?
No.
Okay. I just realized that I might have had an experience. It wasn't, you know, blood pressure or whatever, but I might have had an experience that was paranormal because for a week, when I would wake up and sometimes during the day, I would have up and down dizziness. And that didn't seem right to me. So, anyway, we'll talk about this later. But I just wanted to ask you, gentlemen, this because, part of the ScaryCast experience is when we talk to each other about the experiences we've had
Y-
and try to
Yeah.
figure out what happened
Can I
because
can I can I
yes,
interject here because
absolutely, absolutely.
I've had something that it sounds exactly kind of what you talked about, which is I went to the Tower of London in London, England, which a lot of like really like horrible things happen there, like executions and torture and whatnot. And we were going into these underground areas, and when there was one in particular that I went down into, where people literally were like etched their names and date into the wall. It was like date like 17 something, like before they got executed. And one of these areas, I just felt physically sick and dizzy, like I had to sit down. I had to get out of there. It was like, but I was feeling great all day. Went into one of these rooms, and it was just like, oh, like feeling and like a nauseousness, dizziness, and I think there was something residual about that room, like deep despair that whatever is just recorded in that area. That potentially that could be some of what we sense in some of these paranormal areas is maybe like an old memory that's imprinted in the environment, or like whether it's a house or in this case the
or that it
dungeon.
becomes part of the structure. And that's what I've heard. That's the best that I can say. It becomes part of the structure, so that when you're in there, it kind of leaches out of the structure onto you. Right. Well, I don't know what happened. And that was about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't want to tell Dr. Trey Dunaway, who is a licensed surgeon. He's one of our Monday night co-hosts, great surgeon, but I didn't want to tell him about that. I was afraid, well, what is it? But anyway, yeah, I had that, and I'm beginning to think that there was a paranormalness about that it was not right. But anyway, okay, Mark, your turn to ask a question or make a comment about what Rob has talked about.
Sure. I want to go back to the Bigfoot structures, the X. Like when I think about in nature, are there situations where that happens? The one that comes to mind is like a beaver making wood structures to kind of create their territory. So I know that happens, and maybe like tigers making markings on trees with their claws and things like that. So I could definitely see it being kind of a marker of territory as well as the auditory kind of warning signs. Is there any other, do you guys think, I'll throw it out there to everybody, like any other kind of signals they make that isn't necessarily territorial, or like is there other things that they're doing with these signals or communication that one might be that marking a territory? Is there any evidence for anything else?
Uh, Basically, about all we found, really and truly, is the X's where they've took two trees that are different species. A lot of times, it might be one might be a hickory, one might be a maple, one might be a hemlock, one might be a poplar tree. And they'd stick them in the ground and cross them. But as far as any other marker, I'm not 110% for sure, to be honest, really.
No. Now, Mark, in Alaska, and if you ever come across these where these trees are uprooted and they're upside down, the Alaska natives swear up and down that if the tree is pulled up out of the ground, the roots are sticking up, and the rest of it slammed down in the ground, that it's aggressive. Do not go there. So if you see any of them, then it's probably not going to be a friendly encounter.
Part of me thinks that they're creating things that are almost like camouflaged, so it's almost not to communicate to people. That doesn't stand out as much, like unless you're looking for it, you know what I mean? Like it's almost like a Vietnam like trap out of like the the bamboo or something. You won't see it because it's like in the bush, right? It's like camouflaged in there. Like it's I would imagine if it was to communicate, it would be standing out more, unless they don't want it to stand out more, if that makes sense.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. The ambush sites that we mostly found usually are right next to game trails, and only thing that makes sense to me, I've been deer hunting and well, not so much bear hunting, but been deer hunting and rabbit hunting and everything ever since I was old enough to hold a rifle in my hand. On these game trails, when they set up these ambush sites, my way of thinking, and I think it's the only thing that makes sense to me, they'll build these shelter-like things, not so much to get in out of the weather, but they'll sit there and sort of mimic a stump, so to speak, not move, never make a sound. Deer walks by, they just reach out and grab a hold of it by the neck, snap its neck, take it on back, and they'll sit and wait on the next one. If a raccoon or a possum, rabbit, or bobcat or anything else comes along, they'll do the same thing. It's just a quick, easy way for them to gain a meal. You take a creature, like Bigfoot, anywhere between 7 to 9 foot tall, and he weighs anywhere between 275 to 800 pounds. They're going to need a lot of food in order to keep them going. They're not going to exert a whole lot of energy if they don't have to. If they can get a quick, easy meal, whether it be following a pack of coyotes, because pack of coyotes, if the deer population in the area is up high, they're going to kill, coyote is going to kill 3 deer a day. And who's to say Bigfoot's not going to take it away from them? They may share the kill. Yeah, I mean, it's just a flip of the coin. You don't know exactly how they're going to react because nobody's really and truly ever that we know of, using Ron Moorhead as an example, and people like of that caliber has never really and truly what you'd say caught one, studied it, and figured out, well, it does this, or no, it does not do that, and so forth. I mean, it's more or less luck of the draw. If you know your animals and know what you've been hunting for all your life, you can pretty much safely guess, but you can't sit there and say, okay, this is absolutely what's going on. That's absolutely what's going on, and so forth. You sort of have to try to find a happy medium and find a pattern in all of it.
Okay. Very interesting. All right. All right. Now I'd like to stop everything and it's time to thank our sponsor, Mind Zero, the great sauna and cold plunge expanding all over the United States. Mind Zero is in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, South Kings Highway. It's opening up soon in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, just outside of Charleston, coming to Boulder, Colorado, and coming to one and only Raleigh, where NC State is. Go Wolfpack. Mind Zero is great. You can go in there and experience a 200-degree sauna. Then you can jump in a 43-degree cold plunge. If you want to think about it, there is nothing more exciting and exhilarating than that cold plunge after your sauna experience. Go check out mindzero.com to get more information and more locations. And by the way, what was interesting, and I stepped away from the camera just a moment. Matt talked about that famous phrase, down the rabbit hole. This is so that all scary casters realize that Down the Rabbit Hole is the name of the first chapter of Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. So there you go. Down the rabbit hole, we're talking about one of the greatest phrases in all of English literature. And thank you, Lewis Carroll, for giving us Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. So those are my PSAs, messages, and sponsors for the bottom of the hour. All right, Rob, tell us another story. One story we got some really interesting talk about, and I think it was wonderful. So tell us another story. You're on deck.
Well, do you want to know about ghost or some more Bigfoot stories?
Let's do another Bigfoot story. I think Bigfoot's Matt, do you agree that tonight Bigfoot is the name of the game?
Sounds good to me.
Mark, do you agree Bigfoot's the name of the game tonight?
Absolutely. And we're going to upload this to Bigfoot and Company, correct, on YouTube. So it'll be definitely
Absolutely.
appropriate.
I'll be doing it tonight after everything's over. So yes, Rob, give us another Bigfoot story.
Well, I'll tell you one that this one was, I think, 2 years ago. Me and my wife was with the Bigfoot 911 team out of McDowell County, North Carolina. Bigfoot 911 does the Bigfoot conference, not conference, but they do the conference too, but it's the Western North Carolina Bigfoot Festival in McDowell County, which will be on the 18th of May this year.
That's right. And John Bruner, one of my family friends, we love John Bruner, don't we?
Yes, we do. You cannot beat John Bruner. He's one of a kind. He's an absolute delight and an absolute angel. I mean, the guy is straightforward and he's just as honest as the day is long.
I got to tell you a funny story. Last year, I showed up at the table next to Ron Moorhead. A friend had asked me to come be at their table. And the first thing that John Bruner walked up and said, and he hadn't seen me in 5 years, he said, "Johnny, how have you been?" Called me Johnny, just like everybody in McDowell County called me. It just gave me a chill, and it was wonderful. "Johnny, how you doing?" He gave me a hug. So yes, thank you, John Bruner. You're the best. And his son, John Eric Bruner, helps him put on that wonderful conference along with the McDowell County Chamber of Commerce. They are the best. They're really
Yes, they
wonderful.
are.
And everybody go there. And I think it's about time I better call John Bruner and see if I can get a little table up there. I don't want to miss that one, do I?
No, sir, you do not. We're expecting, hopefully, if the weather's fit and everything goes according to plan. If I'm not bad fooled, I think last year we busted close to 60,000 people in the middle of downtown Marion, and we're trying our best to bust 80,000 people.
Well, I got to tell you something funny. You just said what I would think is the least smart thing in the world. You said if the weather's good, the weather is never good in Marion. It's always cloudy.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know that? Am I correct?
I was trying to keep my fingers crossed, hoping the weather be fit and we don't have no massive rainstorms or windstorms of any kind
Well, we
going on.
don't have rainstorms up there. It's just always cloudy. It just
Oh,
seems
yeah.
to be always cloudy. That's my plug. But Marion's a beautiful town, and it's a great place to come bring your family. Great restaurants, a great golf course. The chamber is marvelous in helping create that wonderful opportunity for the vendors. So please go this Western North Carolina Bigfoot Conference, Marion, North Carolina, the only one in the world. All right. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You made me get excited about Marion there, my mama's hometown. All right, Rob, tell us a story.
All righty. Like I said, this was about 2 years ago.
Okay.
Me and my wife, we're also a member of the Bigfoot 911 team, and we had three teams in the woods in McDowell County. We John Bruner was on one team. Me and my wife was on one team. Let's see, it was John Eric was running base camp. Brad and Mark and some other guy, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, they were running team three. Well, in the area where we was at, as bad as I hate to say it, we were in cell phone hell. No signal. You couldn't get a text out. You couldn't call anything.
Oh,
Well,
you've been to McDowell County, huh?
oh yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, we got so excited on this hunt because prior to that, John had found some evidence. He'd hung up a few of those, use them more or less at Halloween, for trick or treaters. It's called those glow sticks. You snap them, you shake them, and they'll glow. John had hung a few up in the woods prior to that, and he had some stuff moved, and it wasn't by human intervention either. And we was all excited. We got in the woods. First thing we realized, we didn't have radio. I was like, well, we're 2 miles away from base camp. I'm not walking all the way back to get a dousted radio. Well, me and my wife on the team in the middle. We had Brad and Mark. They were in the team off to our left, probably, I'd say they were 1,200 yards or better off to our left. John and AJ, they were on the other team to the right. Well, me and my wife were going through our wheels looking for sign. We was looking around, and we come up on this little rise, and the U.S. Forest Service had done a controlled burn in the area. Well, everything was, charred. It was black. If there's any tracks, it'd be a heck of a lot easier to see. Well, we was going through there. Me and my wife was talking amongst herself. Then all of a sudden, I noticed she hushed. Well, I was just running my mouth and playing on my flashlight because my flashlight was trying to die on me. I thought, well, it's got a little battery pack in it. Maybe if you take that battery pack off, it's got them little doohickeys in the back where you can put a set of batteries in. Some flashlights are made that way. This is the first time I'd ever fooled with this one. My light was trying to go out, and I was standing there monkeying with it and everything else. It just dawned on me, she's hushed. I thought, uh-oh. turned around and looked at her, and I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Come here, Mick." I said, "What?" She said, "Turn your light off and come here for just a second." I said, "What are you looking at?" Because she was looking directly straight in front of us. The laurel was about, almost up to your chin. I mean, just in a flat line along that ridge. And I said, "Honey, what in the world are you looking at?" And she said, "Shut up, come over here and tell me what I'm looking at. I think I'm looking at something, but I don't know."
Now,
Well,
this is starting. Hey, now, Rob, this is starting to sound like All in the Family and Edith Bunker and Archie Bunker. Keep on going.
anyways, the way the light was, it was around about 15 minutes till 10 o'clock at night. You could see outlines with the naked eye, but you couldn't, make out colors if you turned your light off. We had a slight moon in the sky. It was probably, I guess it was about 2 weeks before the Bigfoot festival. I got down there and I got to looking at it. She said, "Now let your eyes adjust and tell me what you see." I said, "What are you looking at?" She said, "About 70 yards out. Tell me what you see on that ridge." I get to looking at it after my eyes adjust. I said, "Uh-oh." She said, "What do you mean, uh-oh?" And I said, "Well," I said, "whatever that is," I said, "looks like a 4x8 sheet of plywood with a head stuck on it." She said, "That's exactly what I'm looking at." We stood there and watched it, and he stepped out from behind a tree, and he was about, from his chest to the top of his head was about 3 foot above the laurel. Now the laurel was right around the 6 foot range. And I said, "That's exactly what's going on." Well, he started walking towards us, and I looked at her and I said, "This ain't good." She said, "What do you mean this ain't good?" I said, "We're fixing to get got." So I went reaching for my pistol. Now I don't carry in the woods specifically to harm anything. I carry in the woods in case you get on a pack of coyotes, you get on a rattlesnake, copperhead, you get between a mama and her cub. Anything in the world could possibly happen. Some locations, you might even get on a crackhead. Who knows? You, I don't never go in the woods unarmed, period, whatsoever. So I go reaching for my pistol and he stops. He said, "What's he doing?" I said, "He knows what I'm reaching for." So I just freeze my hand right where it's at. I've still got my hand on my judge, and he backs up, takes a few steps off to our left, which is his right, and he goes to backing up. Only thing we can still see is a big old outline. You can tell it's covered in hair, but you can't see no facial features. You can't see no skin color, nothing. So he walks over to his right and goes backing up. And she said, "Where's he going?" I'm trying my best to eyeball it. And I said, "Oh," I said, "I know exactly where he's at because I knew this area." I said, "There's an oak grove up there, not too far." I said, "About 35 yards in behind him, white oak trees." I said, "He gets in those oak groves, he's going to put some distance between us and him." Well, lo and behold, he sure did. He walked right into that, and he started easing up the ridge. She said, "Where's he going?" I said, "If he goes right-handed off into that holler," I said, "he's going home." She said, "Where's home?" I said, "There's a rock cliff on the other side of that." And I said, "I'll bet you $1 there's a cave over there, maybe 2 or 3 of them, and that's where he's going." Well, lo and behold, again, that's exactly the way he went. He walked completely totally away from us. No sound. You could see him. You could see him moving, but he never growled at us. We didn't smell no rough odor, nothing. And she said, "Now what do we do?" And I said, "Well," I said, "seeing we don't have a radio, We can't get a hold of John and AJ and let him know what's going on. I get to looking at my watch, and I said, it's almost time for us to head back to base camp anyways. I said, we'll just go ahead and go on back. Well, when we get back to base camp, John and AJ they're as excited as a 3-year-old with a new sucker. They was jabbered and cutting loose, and I said, what's the matter? I hadn't said anything yet. So John and AJ's telling everybody about the one that they had jumped. AJ's about 6'6", and this was almost about 2 foot taller than AJ. And they was telling the size and everything of what they had jumped, and I was just standing there sniggering. John turns around, he looks at me, and he says, "What are you laughing at?" I said, "You jumped one about 9 foot tall, correct?" He said, "Yeah, but why are you sniggering?" I said, "Unbeknownst to everybody," I said, "you and AJ run that thing in on top of me and Mama." He said, "Do what?" And I told him where it was at. He said, "You were exactly 1 mile off to our left." I said, "Which way did he go when you jumped him?" He said, "In y'all's direction." I said, "Yeah." I said, "He come within about 60 yards of where we was at and stopped." I said, and then he turned around and he went back towards the cave, towards that rock cliff. And he's,
Now I'm gonna tell you something, Rod. 60 yards is not very far.
no, he's
I'm
a
experienced
good-sized boy.
golfer, and I know what 60 yards is, and pardon my grammar, it ain't very far. So we're
No,
saying there.
he was a big boy. I mean, you could make out the outline. You could tell he was covered from the top of his head to the end of his feet. But like I said, the only thing that we could see, because there's laurel between me and him, and the laurel bushes was pretty thick, was chest high. And John and AJ, when they jumped him, they saw him from the top of his head to the end of his toes. He had a 21-inch track. It was about 8.5 inches wide. And supposedly, John and AJ went back the next day because they forgot their plaster of Paris with them on that day. They went back the next day, and I think they got 3 distinct tracks in that same area that were easy to cast and that turned out like they wanted it to turn out.
Wow, that is great. All right, well, we're getting close to our witching hour, and so Matt Delph gets a question, and tonight Mark Johnston gets the last question and the last word on ScaryCast. Matt Delph, you're on deck.
All right. I've noticed that you said that it was controlled burn. Was there any? I always, for whenever I research, there's a couple signs I always look for an area. Of course, a new sighting, recent sighting. Another one is close parks, like campgrounds, stuff like that. Controlled burns. Was there any close campgrounds or anything in that area?
Oh yeah, there's
Oh,
several campsites that was on national park land.
so you were in North Carolina, correct?
Yes, we were.
Okay,
We
yeah,
were,
I do a
in
lot in
McDowell
that
County.
area. I know. I'm pretty sure right in that whole area where you're talking about, a lot of activity, lots of activity.
Absolutely.
And that's,
All right. And so Matt, you've been in those areas before, right?
oh yeah, I'm all up and down the Appalachian Mountains there, North Carolina. From especially one hot spot area right now, I'm gonna say is around just outside of Hot Springs, North Carolina. I've been getting a
Right.
lot of reports here lately, so.
Right. We've talked about that. Well, that's great. All right, Mark Johnston, the last question and the last word tonight on ScaryCast.
Well, it seems like I know talking to Matt and you guys in previous podcasts that region, the Appalachia Mountain region, is like a lot of Bigfoot sightings are there. I'm wondering, like, is there some kind of geographical reasons or potentially like I know it's like it's one of the most diverse like ecosystems, like ancient ecosystems like on the planet. Uh, I've heard like things about like potentially it has like a fault line that goes through it, so there might be a lot of underground tunnels and like underground potentially waterways and things like that. So that in that aspect of things, maybe that's where there might be some hidden caves where they might be living. I'm just wondering about like because you guys are obviously from there. I'm not. I've just heard about this region. Um, what kind of geographical and biological reasons do you think that this is a hotspot for Bigfoot?
Well, and especially McDowell County and along the Blue Ridge Mountains, you've got quite a bit of quartz. You got some gold in a few places. Um, More or less the gold end of it. There's a little bit in Mitchell County. Most of it's down around Vane Mountain on the lower end of McDowell County. You've got a lot of bedrock. You've got a lot of fault lines. I'm not 110% for sure, but I'm just about convinced we may have a few ley lines going around here. You've got quite a few electromagnetic fields that are natural in the woods. It's, just unexplainable, but it's there.
I've got to stop you right now when you mention ley lines because we just had Pete Champeau, who's pretty much the world expert on ley lines, and we had Dan Shaw, his very good friend, on ScaryCast, and we are putting together a book that will show you and teach you how to find the ley lines in your county. So it sounds like, Mr. McDowell County, you might want to come out there with me and John Bruner, and we might want to map the ley lines in McDowell County. How does that sound?
That sounds absolutely awesome. I'd love to be able to do that.
Okay, good. Well, I will let you know. In fact, just so that everybody knows, Dan Shaw, right before ScaryCast, I got an email from him that said, I just sent you a book by Pete Champeau. I mean, this community is great. They're working with us to do discovery, which is the single most important thing we can do. So yeah, that's when you mention that word, I'm just glad to let everybody know, and just know that ley lines are fun. We got to figure out what their correlation is to Bigfoot sightings, UFO sightings, but there is one, and so it's great. All right, Mark, the last word for tonight on ScaryCast.
Yeah, well, just to follow up on that, like it makes sense that if there's some geographical regions that where there's specific energy and we've talked before about maybe the whole interdimensional theories and energetic vortex theories, especially with Dan that one podcast. I'm wondering if there's especially with the paranormal, maybe more paranormal experiences around these areas. But when it comes to Bigfoot, is there also some interdimensional component there as well? Like the fact that we're never able to truly find them. They're pretty evasive physically. They can evade us, but maybe there's also other means that they do that as well. But things like UFO sightings in specific regions, there seems like there's certain hot spots of all types of things. And from what I gather, the Appalachia region is definitely a hotspot region for these things.
Yeah, it's a hot spot, but as far as the interdimensional aspect of it, to be quite honest, I've never experienced anything like that. What I've experienced, the three creatures that I saw, first two I saw was in 2019. The last one I saw was about 2 years ago when I was with Bigfoot 911 expedition. These creatures that I encountered, they seem more flesh and blood to me than anything. I've been in the woods, like I said beforehand, been a hunting ever since I was big enough to hold a rifle in my hand, and been turned loose in the woods when my dad looked at me and said, well, he said, you're safe enough to hunt by yourself. You know what you're doing. You followed everything that I've showed you. And I've seen I've seen all kinds of animals that Western North Carolina has to offer. You know, bear, deer, bobcat, squirrel, you name it. These creatures, they are extremely amazing to me. I have never seen anything move that quick, that agile, and that smooth in my entire life. You put, I'm just going to use a bear for example. You put the right environment, you know, like the background, whether it be a laurel thicket, whether it be, you know, high grass or whatever, and you put the right light conditions in the right perspective, you'll see a bear vanish right before your very eyes. You'll be sitting there watching it and take your eyes off of it for just a split second if something other else catches your peripheral vision. And when you look back in that same area, whether it be 1 second later or whether it be 2 seconds later, and you're like, where did he go? And you can't find him. And then when he moves, you're like, oh, well, there he is. Why couldn't I find him? In my opinion, they're masters of their own environment, masters of camouflage. I've even seen a 6 point buck vanish before my very eyes, walk into a laurel thicket, try I couldn't get a shot at him. Men looking at him with a 3x9 scope on a 270 high powered rifle, right in the middle of gun season, legal kill. Cannot find him. Then all of a sudden he'll twitch that tail, or he'll pick that foot up or nod his head to keep him getting his horns hung in the laurel thicket, and you're like, why did I not see him? And you're looking dead at him. I mean, it's just amazing that what animals can do. I've even seen fish vanish in a hole of water, be a fishing for a trout, and you get to looking and you go, well, where did he go? I know he can't go upstream. He can't go downstream. If he did, I would have seen him or at least heard him, depending on the depth of the water. And you get to looking and you're like, well, where did he go? And then all of a sudden you'll see him move. If you watch long enough in the same area, they'll move eventually. I think their curiosity gets the better of them. They're trying to figure out, well, did he leave? I can see him, but it's strange.
Yeah, the animals can do great things. Well, I tell you what, Rob Effler, it has been wonderful having you here tonight on ScaryCast. A lot of fun talking about Bigfoot. I'm going to go ahead and ask you, will you come back if we ask you? You have great stories and great commentary. Will you come back?
Absolutely. I'll be honored to come back. I've enjoyed every minute of it, and I deeply thank you and appreciate every last one of you for having me on.
Well, that's great. I think we are going to be interviewing all 4 or 5 of your members, and we might just get everybody back together and have one big group interview. So we'll see what we can do here really soon. And thank you so much, Matt Delph. Thank you from Ewing, Virginia. We appreciate you being here always. It's just a lot of fun having you. And Mark Johnston from Niagara Falls, Canada. We're so glad you're here. And I'm Dr. John Stamey, live from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. We're glad everyone's here. We will be back very soon. In fact, our next broadcast will be Saturday. It's going to be Susan Green, greatest lady wrestler of all time. She is allowing me to come to her house, and we're going to do one more interview with her, maybe put together a book of her life. And she is a great one. She's got a lot of great stories. Because as you know, ScaryCast is the paranormal and interesting people. And I don't know many people as interesting as Susan Green, the only lady that ever beat the fabulous Moolah. So look, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been great having you here. Again, Rob Effler, we want you back. You're a lot of fun. So we'll talk to you next time. Enjoy it. And thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you very soon. Au revoir. Say goodbye.
Good night,
Goodbye,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye, everybody.